A thread of smoke rose from behind the house the moment George pulled into the gravel drive. He rounded the corner and froze. Barbara stood beside a roaring fire pit, feeding envelopes into the flames.
Just depressing clutter, George. Mom would have wanted a clean house.
Those were Nancy's letters. You had no right.
He lunged past her, plunging his bare hands into the embers. 2 envelopes, half-charred, came away in his grip.
Don't be dramatic. It's just paper. She's been gone a year.
She burned Nancy's voice. 50 years of her words.
That night, under a single kitchen lamp, George smoothed the blackened paper with trembling fingers. Beneath the soot, a string of numbers and the heading Swiss Bank, Zurich emerged, dated 1953.
Nancy never told me. She carried this secret for half a century.
George held the page nearer to the lamp, tracing the faded ink with his fingertip. The numbers pulled him back to a canvas tent in Korea, candlelight flickering on a rough table.
I opened an account in Zurich during R&R. If I don't make it home, this will keep her safe.
A month later, Nancy read that same letter at their kitchen table, a soft smile on her lips. He had written, "Nancy, memorize this number. A Swiss account. Don't tell anyone. Just know it's there." She repeated the sequence 3 times under her breath until it was sewn into her memory.
If I don't come home, Nancy, the account is yours. Promise you'll remember the number.
Don't talk like that, but I'll remember every single digit for you.
She held onto that number for 50 years and never spent a single cent. I have to find out if that money is still there, still waiting after all these years.
The next morning, George sat at the kitchen table with the charred envelope and dialed his nephew's number. His nephew, Patrick Connolly, was a financial attorney who had always treated George's stories with quiet respect.
Patrick, I need you to look into an old Swiss bank account your Aunt Nancy kept from everyone.
Uncle George, accounts from 1953 often go dormant. The bank might not honor the code. I'll look, but manage your expectations.
Manage expectations? He didn't know Nancy. She never forgot a promise.
You're actually chasing a ghost? That letter was a fantasy, and that money is long gone.
It was real to her, so it's real to me.
I'll contact the bank's legacy department. Give me until Friday.
Barbara snorted and left the kitchen, but not before adding, "You'll get nothing but a closed file."
Maybe. But Nancy gave me this clue for a reason. I have to see it through.
By Friday afternoon, the drizzle had turned steady. George sat by the kitchen phone until it rang. Patrick's voice was careful.
Uncle George, the Swiss account is still active. The legacy department confirmed your code. But they demand your physical presence in Zurich.
7 decades of compounding. Nancy's secret was alive. Then we fly. I'm not waiting. Book the next available seats, Patrick.
I'll arrange everything. But be prepared, Uncle George. This will stir up more than just money.
More than money. It's the last piece of her I have left.
You're wasting your savings on a dead woman's fantasy. There's nothing in that bank for you.
She was your mother, and she left me this. That's enough.
He turned away from Barbara, pulled his field jacket from the hook, and began packing a small duffel in the living room, his movements slow and deliberate.
I'm bringing us home, Nancy. Every mile I travel is one step closer to the secret you held for 50 years.
At the airport gate early the next morning, George stood with his duffel, the charred envelope tucked inside his field jacket. Patrick held their tickets.
I haven't been on a plane since we came home from Korea. Strange how one piece of paper can pull you across an ocean.
Whatever we find in Zurich, Uncle George, we face it together. That's what Aunt Nancy would have wanted.
Midway over the Atlantic, George stared out the window at the clouds and let his mind drift back to the city he'd passed through in 1953.
I remember walking into that Swiss bank as a young soldier, still smelling of gunpowder. They looked at me like I was a lost child.
This time you walk in with 70 years of fidelity behind you. That counts for more than you know.
They landed in Zurich under a heavy gray sky and took a tram toward the old banking district, the city's stone facades like pages from a history book.
The streets have hardly changed. Maybe the truth inside those walls hasn't either.
At the corner, the bank rose before them, a fortress of carved stone and brass, bearing no sign. George stopped and drew a breath.
One way or another, the answer lies behind those doors, the one Nancy guarded all those years.
The brass doors closed behind them with a hush. Marble floors and vaulted ceilings swallowed every sound.
Herr Morrison, I am Herr Keller. We received your inquiry. Such an old account requires special handling.
George withdrew the charred envelope from his field jacket and laid it on the counter, the singed edges dark against the stone.
A document of this age and condition is fragile. We must verify the code against our microfilm records. Patience, bitte.
Take whatever time you need. I've been waiting 50 years to hear whether my wife's memory was enough.
For 20 minutes, no one spoke. Keller disappeared through a frosted glass door, and the waiting turned the air sharp.
Herr Morrison, the account is valid. The code matches our archive. Please, follow me to a private office.
70 years. And she never doubted it. Not once.
They walked past walls of polished mahogany to a room with leather chairs and a single green-shaded lamp.
Now the real answer begins. The one hidden inside those numbers all my life.
Herr Keller drew a leather folio from his desk and opened it with the quiet gravity of a man handling centuries.
Herr Morrison, your account was opened July 1953. With compound interest, the current balance is 1,900,000 Swiss francs.
He slid the statement onto the mahogany desk. The number sat there, undeniable.
1,900,000, more money than I've ever seen.
Uncle George, Aunt Nancy never touched a single franc. She kept it all for you.
George's hand hovered above the paper, his calloused fingers trembling against the smooth surface.
Nancy, you smiled at me for 50 years knowing this was here. Knowing and never needing it.
The account survived because it was never claimed. Your wife's discretion preserved it, Herr Morrison.
She carried a fortune in her memory while we clipped coupons and saved pennies, and never once let it come between us.
The green-shaded lamp hummed. Patrick sat back, stunned. George stared at the number, breathless. They left the bank, stepping into the sharp Zurich air. Patrick walked beside George toward the Limmat River.
I don't know what to do with a number that size. It doesn't feel like mine.
What would Aunt Nancy have wanted you to do with it?
Nancy never wanted a fancy life. What mattered to her was remembering the names, the sacrifices, the boys who never came home.
He stopped at a stone railing, watching the gray water churn below. The question coiled in his mind.
She loved the Korean War memorials at the VFW. She'd trace the names and whisper, "They shouldn't be forgotten."
Then maybe the money isn't for you, Uncle George. It's for them, for the ones who never got to come home.
For the names etched in granite. For Olivia, so she learns what sacrifice means. That's what Nancy would have done.
George turned from the river with a new stillness in his posture and started back toward the bank without another word.
We're liquidating the account, every last franc. And then I'm going to use it the way she would have.
Back inside the bank, Herr Keller rose behind his mahogany desk as George and Patrick entered the private office a second time.
Liquidate the account, Herr Keller. Transfer everything to a trust Patrick will manage.
That is a binding instruction, Herr Morrison. Once signed, there is no reversal. Are you entirely certain?
Entirely. The money will restore 3 Korean War memorials in Minnesota and fund an education trust for my granddaughter, Olivia.
I've named it the Nancy Morrison Memorial Fund, with an exclusion clause for Barbara.
Exclude Barbara Morrison entirely. She burned Nancy's letters. She won't touch this.
Keller placed a thick stack of documents before George. George took the pen and signed with a slow, deliberate hand, every stroke a covenant. Patrick countersigned. The room held its breath.
It is done. The funds will be released within 5 business days. You have honored a profound love today, Herr Morrison.
A love that outlived the fire. Nancy, this is for every name you traced at those memorials.
A week after Zurich, George walked through his front door carrying nothing heavier than a calm Barbara couldn't name.
She has no idea what I brought back, and she won't. Not from me.
That afternoon, he called Olivia and met her at a quiet coffee shop near the university.
Olivia, your grandmother left behind more than letters. She left a way to secure your future, an education trust, fully funded.
A trust? For me? But how, Grandpa? Where did this come from?
From a secret she guarded since 1953. She held on to it for 50 years. It's yours now for your education and a start in life.
Olivia pressed her hand to her mouth, tears falling before she could speak. Meanwhile, Barbara paced her kitchen, unsettled by George's composure. She'd noticed the lawyer's calls and the foreign postmark on a letter.
George, it's Barbara. I want to know what you're hiding. You've been different since you got back.
Let her dig. The truth is already locked in stone and trust funds. She'll never touch it.
At the granite base of the Korean War Memorial, George gathered a small knot of fellow veterans under the gray sky.
Nancy loved these memorials. She'd trace the names and say, they shouldn't be forgotten. So I'm restoring 3 of them, starting with this one.
The old soldiers stood silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, they stepped forward to shake his hand. 2 weeks later, Barbara paced her kitchen and noticed a blinking voicemail light on the house phone George kept in the den. The voice on the machine said, "George, the VFW board approved the Nancy Morrison Memorial Fund. Your donation has everyone talking."
Donation? What donation? He had nothing. Where did this money come from?
She drove to the VFW hall within the hour, but the post adjutant only confirmed a trust fund existed and offered no further details.
I'll drag the truth out of George. He's hiding something, and I'm done being treated like an outsider.
Let her come. The fund is ironclad, and the money is already where Nancy wanted it. She won't get a cent.
Barbara stood in the kitchen, a letter from the bank still clutched in her hand, and began composing her final argument in her head. Barbara pulled into the driveway and marched to the front door, her hand trembling with anger.
George, I know about the fund. You've been hiding money from me since Zurich.
It wasn't hidden. It was in a letter your mother kept for 50 years, the one you burned.
What letter? There was no money in those old papers. You're making this up.
A Swiss account. Your mother memorized the number in 1953 and never touched it. It grew to nearly $2 million.
That money should have been mine. You had no right to cut me out of my own mother's legacy.
She left it for me to use. I restored memorials, funded Olivia's education. You get nothing.
I'll sue you. I'll contest the trust. You can't just erase me from her memory.
George turned his back, pulled a drawer open, and began packing photographs and Nancy's letters into a cardboard box.
Leave, Barbara. This house belongs to the bank now. I'm done with you.
In the empty living room, George lifted the last box, a worn cedar chest that had once held every letter Nancy ever kept. He closed the front door without a backward glance, the key left inside for the realtor. The veterans' co-housing stood near a park, its common room windows warm with yellow light.
George, we've held your room. Welcome to the last barracks you'll ever need.
His new room was small, a single bed beneath a window overlooking a courtyard.
Nancy would have liked this. A quiet place where she could watch the seasons change.
He set her photograph on the nightstand, then placed the scorched tin box beside it, proof against forgetting.
The house is gone now, but the memory that's been here all along, waiting to be rebuilt.
Outside his window, a group of old soldiers gathered at a bench, their laughter quiet, their uniforms civilian. George drew a long breath, then another. For the first time in months, the weight in his chest loosened just a little. Weeks later, under a pale October sun, the first restored memorial gleamed with new granite and polished bronze.
George, they're ready for you. The plaque is about to be unveiled. This is the moment she would have loved. This restoration is not from me. It's from my wife, Nancy. 50 years ago, she memorized a single number that made this possible. She never spent a cent on herself. She only asked that we remember.
A cloth fell away, and the brass plaque caught the light. It read, "Restored by the Nancy Morrison Memorial Fund."
Your name is on your memorial now, Nancy. Every soldier here knows your heart.
One by one, old soldiers stepped forward and pressed their palms flat against the granite, their heads bowed.
2 more memorials will rise before the winter. Olivia, your grandmother's legacy isn't money. It's these stones.
As the crowd thinned, George remained, his hand resting on the engraved name as if to touch her one last time. And for a moment, in the silence, he could almost hear her whisper back, the same promise she'd made in 1953. 2 mornings after the ceremony, Barbara's phone buzzed with a forwarded news article. She read the headline twice.
Korean War Memorial restored. Fund named for Nancy Morrison. He used her name. He used it without me.
Within the hour, she stood before the fresh granite, tracing the engraved words with a fingernail that trembled.
No mention of me. He erased me from my own mother's legacy.
By afternoon, she was at the veterans' co-housing, rain streaking her trench coat as she pressed the buzzer for George's unit.
George, come down. I saw the plaque. You owe me an explanation.
Upstairs, George stood by the window looking down at her, his face set like stone. He did not move.
I'm not leaving until you face me. You can't lock me out of this. She was my mother.
After an hour of silence, she pulled a sealed envelope from her coat and slid it under the door. The paper was already damp. Then she turned and walked back into the downpour, her steps uneven, her shoulders finally slumping with the weight of defeat. Well, after dark, George stepped into his room and saw the envelope lying wet on the floor. He bent slowly, one hand on his knee, and lifted it.
Her handwriting, even through the rain, I'd know it anywhere.
He held the envelope between his fingers, the seal still intact.
She wants me to read it. She's hoping I'll forgive.
But he did not open it. He stepped to the shelf beside Nancy's photograph and the scarred tin box.
No. This silence is the only answer she deserves.
The white envelope came to rest beside the photograph, its words sealed inside.
Nancy never asked me to forgive what was burned. She only showed me what was worth saving.
He sat in his chair, his gaze resting on the photograph, and breathed quietly into the silence. Late morning sun fell through the common room windows as George cradled a coffee mug, a newspaper folded on his knee.
George, tell the young ones about Chipyongni. They need to know what a real February feels like. 40 below, no sleep, and our sergeant sang Hank Williams to keep us awake. We held that hill for 3 days. Nancy waited for a letter I couldn't write until spring.
Later, Olivia found him on a bench beside the small garden, hands resting on his thighs.
I went to the memorial this morning, Grandpa. I traced her name on the plaque.
In his room, George pulled the scorched tin box from the shelf and lifted the lid.
She kept every letter I ever sent. Even the one Barbara tried to burn still has a corner she'd touched.
Grandma would be proud, you know. Not of the money, but of what you built with her memory.
Proud enough to let the silence stand. The letter stays sealed.
When Olivia left, George remained by the window, the tin box on his lap, the unopened letter still beside Nancy's photograph. The last memorial rose beside the river as the first snow dusted the granite. A small crowd gathered.
George, the floor is yours. The third and final stone. This isn't my stone. It belongs to every name carved here, and to the woman who made certain they'd never fade. Nancy Morrison once told me memory is the last duty of the living. This memorial is her doing.
The small gathering clapped, old hands cupped over old ears.
That's my mother he's talking about, and I'm not there.
George lowered his head, 2 fingers pressed to the brim of his cap. Before the last prayer, Barbara turned her back and walked toward the bare trees. She never heard him speak Olivia's name in the closing blessing.
3 stones, 1 for each year I was gone. It's finished, Nancy.
Spring thaw brought mud to the courtyard, and George took to cleaning his room every Saturday morning. He lifted the tin box, wiped the shelf with a cloth, and let his fingers pause beside the envelope.
Still sealed. Still waiting like a question I've already answered.
His hand hovered over it a moment, the paper now bone dry and slightly curled at the corners.
Opening it won't bring back what was burned. It won't change what I built in her name.
He withdrew his hand and set the tin box back in its place, covering a sliver of the envelope. Then he put on his field jacket, checked the flag patch, and stepped into the hallway. The door clicked shut. In the silence, the envelope remained, its seal unbroken.
That's my answer. She gave me letters worth saving. Not this one.
He walked outside to meet the other men on the bench, leaving the shelf undisturbed. A full year turned. On the anniversary of that first restoration, George rose before the other men and walked to the memorial alone. The granite still held the chill of night, but the rising sun painted Nancy's name in warm copper.
You'd have loved this quiet hour, Nancy. Just the names and the light.
He traced her name with a bare fingertip, the way she used to trace the letters he sent home. A shuffling step approached. Another veteran, a man he'd shared the common room with, stopped beside him.
Thought I'd find you here. Same thing every year for my Mary. It never gets old, does it? No, it just gets quieter, and that's a good thing.
They stood without speaking, 2 old soldiers holding the same vigil for different names. Later, back in his room, George sat on the edge of the bed, the tin box beside him, the sealed envelope unchanged on the shelf.
I've made my peace with the fire. The rest is just smoke.
Later that same afternoon, the sun low, George pulled the tin box onto his lap and lifted the lid. He sifted past charred fragments and found a letter from June 1953. Not the code, just a memory of a sunny Saturday. He read aloud softly, "George, the lilacs are in bloom. I sat on the porch and imagined you here. When you come home, we'll plant more."
She never asked for money. She asked for a porch and lilacs.
He chuckled, a low sound that filled the quiet room, and traced her handwriting with his thumb.
This is what Barbara couldn't burn. The words I wrote, the words she saved.
He refolded the letter carefully, its creases soft as cloth, and set it back inside the box. Then he closed the lid, laid the tin box on the shelf beside her photograph, and let his hand rest on the cool metal.
Some inheritances are carved in stone. This one is written in ink.
And for the first time since the fire, the silence in the room felt full instead of empty. Outside, the memorial sank into violet dusk, its brass plaque a quiet rectangle of reflected stillness. On it, a single sentence kept vigil, restored by the Nancy Morrison Memorial Fund. The names of the fallen glowed faintly in the last light. Inside George's room, the shelf held 3 things now: a photograph, a scorched tin box, and a white envelope still sealed. The envelope had never been opened. It would never be. Some answers are not found in words, but in the silence that outlasts them. The memorial stood, the letter rested, and the old soldier had found his peace. George Morrison's story didn't end with rage, or money, or a burned letter. It ended with a choice to honor what mattered. And that, in itself, was a legacy no fire could touch. The end.